Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Debatable with your hosts, Nina and Kyle.
And for this holidays, we ruin Christmas for you. Specifically Santa Claus.
Let's cancel Santa.
Merry Christmas, Kyle.
Merry Christmas, Nina.
Alright,
So we are recording from my house in the province. I have
Yes.
Nina over for
Yes.
this holiday season.
Yes, I've been adopted. Yay! I'm no longer an orphan. So we're here. We decided, why not record? There's barely any internet in this farm. Barely anything to do. And we had a lot of time to talk about Christmas and all the possible arguments and discussions that I will bring up to make Kyle's entire family uncomfortable. I'm ready to fight your family, Kyle.
So first you were thinking about who owns the North Pole? You were thinking about, is it Rest Nolios? Is it Rest Communists?
Yes, normal conversations.
Normal conversations, during the Christmas season.
So we discovered though that Denmark apparently has a claim to the North.
Yeah, so apparently, the general rule is for places like the high seas, outer space, Antarctica, and even the North Pole, the rule there is no country gets to own it. It's res nullius or terra nullius, which means that no country owns that land. No country owns the high seas, no country owns outer space, no country owns Antarctica. And there's another concept called res communis, which is basically that
Everyone owns it.
Everyone owns it. So everyone has the right, for example, to exploit parts of the high seas, for example. So the problem with North Pole is that in the early 2010s, and I think around 2014, Denmark claimed the entirety of the North Pole.
It's 2015 actually. I do
Yeah.
have matter.
So this is what we're gonna talk about for a little bit before we go on to the meat and potatoes of this episode, which is about Santa. Alright, so according to Denmark, they have exerted sovereign rights over the North Pole. And let's talk a little bit about this. And we didn't prep this, so let me just go off script for a little bit.
Okay.
So, the North Pole is very near Greenland. And do you know what country, if Greenland is a country?
No. Don't quiz me. I feel stupid in front
No,
of our
because-
followers.
Because I used to think that Greenland was its own country, but it's not. It's actually part of Greenland. It is the subject of this entire case in international law called the Eastern Greenland case, where the court decided that it was actually Denmark that has sovereign powers over Greenland because it has historically exerted sovereign rights over that
I've read
land.
this case. Yeah, I read this case from my class.
So I think the theory of Greenland, of Denmark here, is to extend its argument in Greenland and extend it to the North Pole. So before it was considered to be res nullius, it was considered by Denmark to be part of its sovereign territory. So I don't think it was ruled upon yet. I don't know. I personally would like it a bit more if it was res nullius.
Yeah.
But if it's not, let's talk about the motion again. Let's talk about the motion. The motion is this house would arrest Santa Claus.
Yes.
So, literally, we're going to send this guy to jail.
Yeah.
So, there are going to be two parts to this discussion. The first part is, do we even have the right to arrest him?
And who has the right, if ever?
And who has the right to arrest? And then second, let's talk about...
All the crimes of Santa Claus.
Yeah, all the crimes of Santa Claus.
Yeah.
So first, do we have the right to arrest Santa Claus? Let's think about it. If we're under the assumption of the North Pole being res nullius, everyone has a right to it, then obviously everyone has the right to arrest.
Yeah, it's like the high seas.
It's like the high seas and like piracy.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I know things.
We're gonna be talking about why he's a pirate later.
No, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, so if it's res nullius, it's pretty straightforward. Every state has the right to arrest.
Yes.
But if it is, for example, Denmark, this gets a little bit more complicated. And I think on government, we can argue that states have the right to arrest because of the responsibility to protect. The responsibility to protect is basically where if there are egregious human rights violations and the host state, in this case Denmark, is either unwilling or unable to protect its citizens against egregious human rights violations, then the international community has the collective responsibility to protect these populations against...
Doesn't mean that that the elves are part of the citizens? Are they even registered citizens?
No, they're not. They're probably not registered citizens, but I still think that they're like deserving of protection from the international
obviously,
community.
I'm not arguing against that. I am not for human rights violations, just to be clear.
You're cancelled.
I'm cancelled. All right, continue.
Yeah, so that'll be my argument. Like, even if it were Denmark, they have the responsibility to protect their people, even the elves. And if they're unwilling or unable to do so, then it becomes the duty of the international community to intercede on the elves' behalf. And I don't think that Denmark can hide behind the notion that the elves aren't even our citizens. Because if you think about it, if you go to another place, let's go to Myanmar. let's talk about the Rohingya for a little bit.
All right.
So the Rohingya aren't even citizens of Myanmar, and yet they are being subjected to inhumane treatment. If we're going to restrict the notion of responsibility to protect to only mean the protection of the citizens of that country, then we restrict ourselves to, and we disallow ourselves from interceding on behalf of those oppressed peoples that aren't even recognized to be citizens by their own states.
Yep.
Yeah. So I would say on government, that's an airtight case for why it's possible. Yeah.
I mean, in opposition, I wouldn't attack the whole jurisdiction and who cares.
Yeah.
I would just go straight to talking about why we shouldn't do it, why there are repercussions to arrest Santa, etc. But let's go to the arguments, the fun parts. You know?
Fun part. The second part, let's talk about what crimes there are. Yeah, let's send this guy to jail.
Yay!
For government, there are lots of obvious crimes here, right? So obviously, he's running a fascist Arctic labor colony. Obviously, he's doing a lot of trespassing. Obviously, he's doing a lot of burglary. Obviously, he's running a surveillance type state kind of thing. So let's talk about those basic crimes first.
Crimes.
Every time you Google, is Santa a criminal? These are the crimes that show up the most. So first, slavery, right? We don't really know who these elves are, but we also don't know if they're getting paid. We also don't know if they're allowed to form unions. We don't know if they even have holiday breaks. For all we know, because the only records that we have of elves are the elves that are working in Santa's workshop. They're probably raised there from birth to death, and their literal purpose in life is to assist this old man.
Yeah, and from the movie Elf, the one with Will Ferrell, we're made also to believe that they are children in mindset throughout their whole lives. That's also a form of abuse in itself. Literally, they are not being raised properly to develop their own faculties and thinking skills.
Yeah, so it's either child labor, or at the very least, we get him because he doesn't have the proper documentation.
Yeah.
But the reason why I believe that this is slavery is because since we know that a lot of them from the movie Elf, since we know that a lot of them are children in mindset, they probably did not have the ability to consent. So if you have a syndication of doing this, of people who cannot consent, making them work so many nights a year to make toys for other children, that's basically a sweatshop. But more than that, they didn't consent to it because they were born and raised believing that this was their purpose in life. So for all respects and for all purposes, for our purposes, I mean, this is very obviously slavery.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the first basic crime we have.
Basic crime.
Next, let's talk about trespassing and burglary.
Alright, this is pretty basic. Yeah.
How does he enter into a house, right? So he enters many houses. He enters into your homes using the chimney, or if there is no chimney, obviously using the window.
Yep, obviously,
he never
definitely.
uses the door. Right?
Definitely.
So under our laws, if anybody enters into a home using a method that is not created to effect entrance, let's say a window, or let's say a chimney, or let's say underground, I don't know what
through
kind
a
of
secret tunnel system,
a secret tunnel system, that is unlawful entry. All right, so that's already trespassing. So there's an argument that opposition could make, a lot of these people put out cookies, put out warm milk, and that obviously means consent. They consented to Santa's breaking and entering. And my answer to that is, how does Santa know that it was there for his purposes, right? How does Santa know that the warm milk and cookies were put there specifically for him? Did the owners of the homes communicate to him beforehand?
Yeah, that's possible though. Letters from the children to Santa Claus, please visit me and give me my gift on the 24th. I used to make letters, so I think that's a document of consent in it.
Alright, but in my opinion, I don't think that 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 counts as much because
I'm a child.
First of all, you were a child. But second of all, even if you have second of all, even if you might have consented to Santa entering, Santa probably does not know or shouldn't have reason to believe that the consent happened. Because in order for consent to happen, the consent must first be communicated. So it's not enough for child Nina to say, "Oh Santa, please visit me." There also needs to be like a consensus, like parents also sending Santa letters like, "Dear Santa, please listen to Nina's request and break into our home. We consent to it." So I don't think you can presume that. At least in most instances that I am familiar with, even if the child says, "Please visit me, Santa," the parents do not take it to mean, "Please invade my home."
That's fair, that's fair.
Yeah.
So it's still breaking and entering no matter how you cut it.
Yeah. So surveillance, this is the third basic crime.
Yep.
Right? Surveillance. This is simple because how does he know if you are sleeping? How does he know if you're awake?
How does he know if you've been bad or good?
Right? So according to Claus, like the movie Claus from Netflix, it was all just made up.
By
But
the
I
way,
don't
you should
believe
watch.
that.
You should watch that movie though.
I don't believe that. I think Klaus is pro Santa Claus propaganda.
Wow.
I don't really believe this.
Wow.
In fact, I believe that Santa is actually a person who has changed his identity over the years and was rebranded by the Christian majority in order to make him palatable to the masses. Because I have it on good faith. I have an informant that said
You have an informant. Wow.
that said that ancient Germanic tribes who worship Odin, as in the Norse god Odin, and they said that during those times, they feared that during the December parts of the year, during winters, they would see Odin riding through the night sky on Sleipnir, which is his eight-legged horse. And basically, he does surveillance on everybody. And if you do something bad outside of your home, he will punish you. So I have reason to believe that this version of Odin just changed his identity and also was helped by the Christian majority in order to make him palatable. So he got help from big Christianity, okay? He got help from big
Christianity.
Christians.
Yeah?
Big Christianity.
Yeah? Okay, that's a thing now.
Yeah. He has big Christians in his pocket.
Big Christian
Yeah.
energy.
The big Christian lobby.
Okay, we get it.
Yeah,
They're big
so-
Christian.
So we have three arguments here. We have slavery, we have trespass and burglary, we have surveillance. Alright, let's talk about closing. Let's talk about closing.
Yeah, if I was closing, I'd be like, oh no, what other crimes
What
exist?
other crimes,
Oh.
alright? What other non-basic crimes exist? So first, let's talk about animal abuse, right? Animal abuse. Let's think about poor Rudolph the red-nosed slave, alright? So, let's think about it. What does Rudolph have to do during Christmas? He has to travel at least 24,901 miles because that's the circumference of the earth. And for 300-pound creatures like Rudolph,
And
like
that's the average.
on average, reindeers weigh about 300 pounds, right? Okay, in order to travel 1 mile, that is around 200 calories. So if we multiply 24,901 miles by 200 calories, that's at least 400,000 calories a night. Why is this super bad? Alright, so that's 1,600 Big Macs per reindeer. And we know that it isn't just Rudolph, okay? Rudolph leads a whole bunch of reindeer.
I don't know their names, but they have names also.
Don't stop dehumanizing the reindeer. Anyway, yeah, so that's 1,600 Big Macs per reindeer. Also, if you eat 2,000 calories a day, every single day for a whole year, that's around 750,000 calories. So imagine having to eat half a year's worth of food in one night to fly a freaking jolly boy and all of his millions of gifts. Alright, and this is only the minimum, right? 400,000 calories is just the minimum.
Yeah.
Because they don't just circle around the world once. Because it's just one rotation or whatever. They have to circle it over and over again to reach every single part of the earth. So this is obviously cruel and inhumane treatment against animals. There's no way that you can argue against that.
And I'm pretty sure you need like a license if you want to own reindeer as a pet. I don't think he has proper documentation for anything at all.
Yeah. Although on opposition, you can argue that one of the exceptions to animal abuse, at least under our law, is if
It's
it's in the exercise of
religious activities.
religious beliefs.
Yeah.
But I disagree with that because even if you have religious beliefs, the question now becomes whether or not Santa himself believes that there is a religious responsibility to do this. And I don't think that he genuinely believes that because the practice practice emanates from his own like belief. So he's basically creating his own religion to serve his own purposes, to like not answer for animal abuse.
Yeah, but what does Santa get out of this? What does he get from doing
I think
all
Santa
this?
is just doing this to feed his own vainglory.
His reputation and ego, you say?
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll talk about that in up. But for me though, like another up argument is like just to respond to the whole animal abuse thing isn't the whole story of Rudolph the fact that he wanted to volunteer? Like a lot of the reindeer take a lot of pride in what they do every Christmas, right?
Yeah, but the reason why we're protecting animals is because they can't really consent.
Yeah, but we're
No,
talking
so-
about fictional reindeer with names and glowing noses.
I didn't know that Rudolph was fictional. I thought you were assuming that he's a real
Okay,
person.
fine. Obviously, we're assuming they're real. But if we assume that, we also have to assume, therefore, that he has the ability to talk. Because that's how he communicated with Santa that he wanted, right? So
Yeah,
if we're
but you
gonna
can't-
take everything as real.
Yeah, but you can't consent yourself into slavery.
Ah, that's
So,
true. There's the
bang.
argument. Okay, alright. Moving on.
Moving on. So, we already know that he's an animal abuser.
Okay, what else can closing run, Kyle?
What else can closing run? I think that I can argue that not only is he a slaver, not only is he a burglar, not only is he the representation of a surveillance state, he's also a pirate. Let's talk about the UNCLOS for a bit. The UN Convention of the Law of the Sea.
Oh my
because
God.
Article 100
Oh my god, you did research.
in
Okay.
UNCLOS talks about piracy. So piracy basically is any illegal act of violence on the high seas against other ships or aircrafts, or against persons or property on board those ships or aircraft. So let's talk about cruise ships.
Yes.
Let's talk about OFWs. Let's talk about seafarers.
Yep.
They
We're going
also
IR
celebrate.
here.
They also celebrate Christmas, right? So if they celebrate Christmas, that means that Santa necessarily has to break and enter into these ships in order to effect Christmas onto these vessels.
So this is just trespassing and burglary, but we're extending it to cruises in the
Yes.
high seas.
So it is an illegal act of violence in order to enter the vessel. So this is an internationally recognized crime, and it goes beyond the territorial jurisdiction of states, which means that since it's on the high seas, any state can sue Santa for piracy now, right? So he's a pirate. He's obviously a pirate. Okay,
He's a
what
pirate
else?
slaver surveillance state.
What else? And this is, I think,
The best argument.
The best argument. I will argue that Santa is guilty of genocide.
Okay, go for it. Stop laughing and explain yourself.
Okay, genocide. Let's take a look at the Genocide Convention for a little bit.
Okay.
So, genocide talks about a particular list of actions that, when committed with the intent to destroy an ethnic or national minority group, leads to genocide. So, there's a misconception that genocide can only happen if you kill a bunch of people. That's only one of the ways to commit genocide, but it's not the only way to commit genocide. One of the other ways to commit genocide is to deliberately inflict on the group conditions of life that are calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So let's remember again about the elves. We don't know about any other instances in history where elves were ever considered to be a group of people. It is only in Santa and Santa's household. It's only in the North Pole. So we can assume therefore that the elves are a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group that is inherent in the North Pole. So what Santa does is, by forcing them into involuntary servitude, Santa is deliberately inflicting on the elves conditions of life that are calculated to bring about its physical destruction. Why do I say that this is calculated to bring about their destruction? Obviously, it's because it would be unreasonable to expect any group of people to be responsible for the gifts of every single human child on the planet. So, obviously, these are conditions that no worker would be able to survive. So, in order to finish these job orders, these elves would necessarily have to work day and night, toiling over and over again for these toys to be made.
Yes.
So, this is obviously like extremely tiring. This is obviously extremely tiring. And it'll be really bad for their health. So, even if you create a systematic means of making people's health depreciate over time, that could also be considered genocide for the purposes of the Genocide Convention.
Yep.
So, Santa should be arrested, I think, on government. Do you have any arguments for op?
No, not really. We didn't really prep up that much. We were very excited for Gov. So I think in op, basically, you're just here to debunk a lot of the claims that government makes. So I would argue that obviously a lot of people consent to the existence of Santa Claus because they leave out cookies for him. They actually invite him to this home. No one ever reports that someone breaks into their home, right? I'd say that a lot of arrests are only actionable if people actually complain about it or if someone brings it forward, right? Because who are you to assume that it's a burglary if, there was no report or actual, complaints about it, right? So who is acting? Who gets to decide that his actions are wrong all of a sudden if people are completely fine with it? As to the discussion of surveillance, I don't know. That one's hard. Maybe he's just psychic. Do we have to arrest people for being psychic? We don't know if he's actually spying on people. Like, what if he just intuitively knows if someone's good or bad? It's a power he can't control. I think that we have to assume that Santa is first innocent to be able to discuss this properly. I think you guys are all just excited to put him in jail, but we don't even know the extent of his powers, the extent of what he really does, right?
Does the presumption of innocence extend to Santa Claus?
I mean, if the crimes and the charges extend to him, I think the principle should apply to him as well. Don't you? Alright. As to the genocide, I don't know. I feel like even if you did charge him with genocide, what are the odds that it will succeed? I'm pretty sure the International Criminal Court.
International Criminal Court.
Yeah, it's really bad at pursuing justice, right? So I don't think that they do this. I'd also argue, as an extension, we have other priorities. He's not a problem. I deal with ISIS. I deal with everyone else instead of Santa Claus. He's bringing joy into our hearts. Why would I arrest someone who's probably giving children gifts? The people who's actually maybe the only person who gives refugees a reason to hope.
It diminishes our political capital
Yes.
in order to
Yes.
deal with other things.
Exactly. So I have a lot of feelings as to why we shouldn't arrest Santa Claus because there are real life repercussions. All the children in the orphanages that don't have parents to give them gifts, who will they turn to now that you've arrested Santa Claus? I'd say you'd cause a rebellion from all the children all around the world if you put Santa in jail.
I guess that's it for this motion.
For this Christmas special.
For this Christmas special where we rant
About-
for a really long time about the culpability of Santa.
Yep. So if you need a really nice conversation starter, this would be it. You are welcome. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy your holiday. Enjoy thinking about Santa Claus and whether or not he was a criminal his entire time. Bye!
Bye!